Hello guys, Growth is here. In this video I'm going to explain 9 deleted scenes that essentially broke the Alien franchise, in a sense that they shift the lore and the story so dramatically that they completely change the meaning of the movies and the franchise as a whole. We'll cover the deleted scenes showing Elizabeth Shaw's brutal death and how David actually killed her. We'll also go over 4 minutes of the deleted engineer dialogue, as well as the engineer ending scene in Prometheus and a few other scenes from Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3 that reshape the entire Alien mythology. The Alien franchise is probably the only major series where crucial lore-defining scenes end up deleted, but honestly that's what makes this universe so unique and so endlessly fascinating. Egg morphing. One of the most obscure deleted scenes is the egg morphing scene that was removed from Alien of 1979, but it can be found on various special edition Blu-rays. The movie had almost 30 minutes of deleted material, mostly dialogue. However, this egg morphing scene is so controversial that it puts into question the rest of the movies in the Alien franchise. After rescuing the cat Jones and failing to stop the self-destruct mechanism of the Nostromo, Ripley is on her way to the escape shuttle. In the theatrical release, Ripley goes straight to the shuttle. However, in the deleted scene, she first passes through a dark industrial section where she finds Dallas and Brett turning into alien eggs, or egg morphing. This deleted scene is short as it's equally obscure, but it completely changes the xenomorph life cycle and the meaning of what happened in the crashed derelict. After the release of Alien, there was a huge mystery: where do the alien eggs come from? It's only in Aliens that we are introduced to the concept of the alien queen producing the ovomorphs. However, with egg morphing, the xenomorph life cycle becomes much more disturbing and grotesque. Alien victims are slowly transformed into alien eggs with face huggers inside, and this method feels way more coherent with the creature's biology, since a face hugger looks like a nightmarish combination of various human organs. It seems like the face hugger combines the human spine as its tail, human fingers as limbs, and lungs as 2 petals, all rearranged in a twisted assembly, with the rest of the body turning into the actual egg. Also, egg morphing indicates that the eggs found in the crashed derelict were the result of some other creatures morphing into these eggs. This also implies that the eggs were not a natural cargo, but the remnants of space jockeys that were forcibly transformed, which in itself creates way more questions. In general, we can still have the usual alien queen cycle, with egg morphing as a last resort method for xenomorphs to reproduce. But I still find egg morphing far more intriguing and thematically fitting than the alien queen cycle. Prometheus opening scene. Another crucial deleted scene is the opening scene in Prometheus, where we see multiple elder engineers leading a young engineer to the waterfall. This deleted scene changes the meaning of the sacrifice ceremony, in which the engineer consumes the dark liquid and initiates the creation of life on Earth. But this scene also completely changes the notion and portrayal of engineers. In the theatrical cut, it's just a lone engineer, so it looks like a solitary sacrifice. However, with the introduction of other engineers, it looks more like a religious ceremony. On top of that, it also implies that there are classes or castes of engineers, since engineers in the background are significantly older. The early draft script goes even deeper, where not only the same religious ceremony takes place, but the 2 engineers exchange words and have a short dialogue. And I've made a whole separate 15-minute video on this topic, so definitely check it out on my channel. We'll also get to another deleted dialogue between Wayland and the engineer later in the video, and I'll cover what the engineer actually said to Wayland. In general, engineers were the most enigmatic part not only of the Alien franchise, but possibly the most intriguing untold story in all of cinema. But regarding the opening scene, Ridley Scott probably did not want to show more than 1 engineer in a single setting, since it was a solitary space jockey in the original Alien and only 1 surviving engineer on LV-223. So Ridley likely wanted to keep it in the same way in the opening scene of Prometheus. The introduction of elder engineers suggests the existence of an entire engineer homeworld and an engineer civilization that is vast and ancient. It also suggests a hierarchy within the engineer race. So that deleted scene opens the door for an expansion of the engineer lore, which was abruptly deleted and censored. Ripley finds cocooned Burke.
Well, I'm gonna make sure that they nail you right to the wall for this. You're not gonna sleaze your way out of this one. Right to the wall.
And that's exactly what happens to Burke in the deleted scene. This scene can only be found in the Collector's Edition Blu-ray, and it provides a very satisfying end to one of the most disliked and Weasley characters in cinema. In the theatrical version and even in the extended cut, Burke's fate is uncertain. After he locks the rest of the team in a room with xenomorphs so he can escape, another xenomorph ambushes him and is about to kill him. The camera cuts off right before it happens, so the audience assumes that he's dead. However, a quick death would be an easy way out for such a slimy and evil character as Burke, and James Cameron felt exactly the same. Therefore, for his attempt to impregnate Ripley and smuggle an alien embryo inside her body to Earth's laboratories, Burke got an alien embryo inside himself. So in the deleted scene, when Ripley goes down into the xenomorph hive, she finds Burke cocooned to a wall, presumably with the embryo inside him. His fate is predetermined. Even if Ripley wanted to free him, she did not have enough time because she only had about 10 minutes before the nuclear processor would explode, and her priority was to save Newt. So Ripley hands Burke a grenade, his only possible escape from a much more nightmarish and painful death. Moments after she moves deeper into the hive, a massive explosion erupts behind her, signifying that Burke terminated himself. So in a way, at least Burke got enough guts to do the right thing. Even though this scene is really short, it gives us a satisfying death to one of the most disgusting characters in the franchise. The deleted engineer dialogue. It's truly amazing how the engineer dialogue, where the engineer actually speaks the most important and the most anticipated moment in the entire movie, was blatantly deleted. So it's not a coincidence if you watch these scenes where David awakens the engineer and you feel like something is missing and that the scene was just cut short. Because that's exactly what happened, and about 4 minutes of the dialogue were deleted from the movie. I remember the first time I watched Prometheus, I was anticipating what the engineers, the creators of humanity, would say to someone like Wayland. For that reason, cutting that scene felt like removing the very payoff the story was building toward. But fortunately, the Blu-ray and the commentary of the production crew give us a direct, line-by-line translation of what was said in that scene. In fact, the production team hired a real linguist, Anil Bilto, to create the engineer language. David and the actor who played the engineer practiced for a long time to be able to speak it. But unfortunately, it was all for nothing because their dialogue was removed for no reason. We can actually see the real linguist in the movie itself during the scene where David is eating and rehashing the engineer language, which is actually a constructed form of Proto-Indo-European dialect. But let's actually cover what was said in the dialogue. Right after the tubes detach from the engineer's body, Wayland tells David, "Speak to him, David, tell him we came just like he asked," referring to the multiple maps Elizabeth Shaw found around the world which they thought were invitations to LV-223. Then amazingly, the engineer speaks in the most terrifying voice, echoing to the core of the deepest human fears. David translates to Wayland. He asks you why you're here. Then Wayland tells David to tell the engineer the reason he wanted to meet him. So David speaks in the engineer language. Although there are no subtitles, the linguist said in an interview that David's line can be directly translated as, "This man is here because he doesn't want to die, he believes you can give him more life." Asking a creator for more life directly refers to another Ridley Scott movie, Blade Runner, where the replicant Roy asks Tyrell to extend his artificially limited lifespan. Then the engineer angrily responds and David translates, "I told him you want to live forever." He asks why. And then we get a short monologue from the greedy, insatiable billionaire Wayland, in which his arrogance, selfishness, and hubris are on full display. But most amazingly, his speech culminates in the highest level of delusion, with Wayland calling himself a god. So Peter Wayland responds with the childish excitement in his eyes, explaining why he wants to live forever. That man, pointing to David, "My company built him from nothing. I made him in my own image, so he would be perfect, so he would never fail. I deserve this because you and I, we are superior. We are creators, we are gods, and gods never die." Even though David doesn't translate Wayland's monologue, the engineers seem to understand everything, and there's a subtle change in his look as he realizes that humanity has fallen. We can almost see Wayland enjoying what he just said, as if he practiced this dialogue, arrogantly thinking that his answer would satisfy his creator. But he doesn't realize that just like humans view David as a disposable tool, the engineers likely view humans in the same way as pathetic beings. And especially after seeing that all the bad qualities of engineers were inherited by humans. Violence, arrogance, and rebellious nature all combined in Wayland, the engineer proceeds to destroy David and kill most of the crew. And then the scene unfolds exactly the same way as in the movie, and only Elizabeth manages to escape. However, dying at the hands of the engineer would have been a merciful death compared to what David does to her in the deleted scene. I actually made a whole separate video about why engineers hate humans, so definitely check it out for an in-depth exploration and analysis. However, this deleted Blu-ray dialogue is only the tip of the iceberg, because the early Prometheus draft script has a much longer version of this dialogue that spans for about 6 pages. And I'll cover this dialogue in a separate video, so definitely stay tuned. Also, make sure to like and, most importantly, share this video, because we need to keep the engineer narrative alive. It's really obvious that the studio wants to remove the engineers from the franchise at all costs, which is why so much engineer material was deleted. However, the fanbase on this channel are the only people keeping the engineer's story relevant and preserving the franchise's roots with the iconic space jockey, so thank you all for that. Alien Romulus was actually a huge success. It made $350 million on an $80 million budget, and another Alien movie is confirmed and already in production. Therefore, we need to make sure the engineer narrative remains part of the franchise's future. The community on this channel is probably the only reason they included the Offspring hybrid in Romulus, so we're definitely making an impact. You can also support the video by simply clicking share and copying the link, and that will be enough to boost the video in the algorithm. So thank you guys for all your support, and let's get to the next deleted scene, which is the deleted Prometheus ending. It seems like every important scene in Prometheus was deleted, and the same thing happened with the ending. In the theatrical version, right after Shaw reaches Vickers' module, the engineer suddenly attacks, almost like a jump scare. However, in the deleted scene, the encounter between the engineer and Shaw is longer and much more meaningful. After Shaw reaches Vickers' module, she relaxes and drinks something from a bottle. Then decapitated David's head contacts her via radio, saying that the engineer is on his way to her. The engineer then walks among the wreckage, which was also removed from the movie. Once the engineer reaches Vickers' module, he first explores human culture with genuine curiosity, almost like he's getting to know the good side of human nature, which is the opposite of the hubris, greed, and selfishness all exemplified in Wayland. And that actually gives us a small glimpse to a completely different side of the engineers. They are not just violent, evil gods, but can also appreciate the good sides of their creations. The engineer reads a book and is mesmerized by Earth's music. However, suddenly David contacts Shaw via radio, which attracts the engineer's attention, and he finds Shaw hiding behind a bar table. And that moment is very interesting because the engineer is simply observing Shaw, and Shaw is actually the first one who attacks him. Then a fight breaks out, however, the engineer has a hard time overpowering Shaw, who strikes him with an axe multiple times. Eventually, Shaw rushes into the medpod room, but the engineer corners her and is about to crush her head, which is something that the engineers seem to be obsessed with. However, in the last moment, Shaw releases the trilobite from the medroom and it attacks the engineer, protecting its mother. Because in a twisted way, the trilobite is technically Shaw's alien baby. However, the deleted material doesn't end here. After surviving the fight with the engineer, Shaw escapes Vickers' module. She collapses on the ground, crying and realizing that she's completely alone. After she says, "I'm sorry Charlie, I can't do this anymore," David contacts her via radio, reminding that he is still alive. What follows is a completely deleted dialogue that was supposed to set up Prometheus 2, with Shaw reaching the engineer homeworld. The actual engineer homeworld, not the planet we saw in Alien Covenant. Shaw then asks David, "That thing that took your head off, what did it say, David?" "A thing, not too long ago you considered them gods," David replies. "God never tried to kill me, so what did he say, where did he come from?" There is no direct translation, but several of your ancient cultures had a word similar to it, paradise.
Paradise?
Says David as Shaw gets into a cart and drives toward the crashed juggernaut. Once she reaches David's head, he asks her, "May I ask what you plan to achieve by going there?" And Shaw replies, "They created us and they tried to kill us. They changed their minds. I deserve to know why." Does it matter why they changed their minds? Shaw responds, yes it does. I don't understand why, David asks. Shaw then stands up and answers, "I guess it's because I'm a human and you're a freaking robot." She then brutally grabs him by the hair and shoves his head into a bag. But I guess the studio treated the audience like a bunch of robots because we never got to see the engineer homeworld and we never got the answers to Shaw's questions. However, instead we got something much worse, David brutally murdering Shaw, and this leads us to the Shaw's death deleted scene.
Shaw didn't die in the crash.
No.
What did you do to her?
Exactly what I'm going to do to you.
Just like there is a deleted scene showing the death of the most dislikable character Burke, there's also a deleted scene showing how one of the most beloved characters in the Alien franchise, Elizabeth Shaw, is butchered by David. There are rumors that the actress Naomi Rapace had salary disputes, which was one of the main reasons she did not return for Alien Covenant. However, she still appeared in the prologue, indicating that she was willing to reprise her role of Elizabeth. So calling what they did to Shaw a huge disappointment would be a giant understatement. She was ripped out of the franchise in the most brutal and abrupt way, and the deleted scene perfectly exemplifies that. In the theatrical version, Prometheus ends with Elizabeth Shaw and David departing to the engineer homeworld. Shaw needed David because he could read engineer maps and operate their ships. And the next time we see Shaw is in the Alien Covenant prologue, which wasn't even part of the movie. In the prologue that was released as a promotional video, Shaw repairs David despite the fact that he sabotaged the entire Prometheus mission. It might seem extremely silly that Elizabeth Shaw trusted David. However, the Covenant script explains that David was the only person, or the only artificial person she could talk to, as she faced extreme isolation after the loss of her fiancé, Charlie Holloway. The entire story of David and Shaw is very disturbing, and I go in depth about it in another video. It's truly horrifying how in Prometheus Shaw was on David's lap table, and she ends up in the exact same way in Covenant. By the end of the prologue, after reconciling with David, Shaw gets really sick and David puts her in a cryosleep pod. Then the next time we see Shaw is in David's lab, with her body butchered in the most grotesque and unholy way. However, the deleted scene is much worse, and that's probably why it was completely removed from the film. Despite the fact that David even created a tombstone for Shaw, and despite David claiming that he loved her, his definition of love is beyond anything you can imagine. In this Blu-ray deleted scene, David talks about his research he conducted on Planet 4. The deleted scene can't be placed anywhere in the movie since it presumably happens before the events of Alien Covenant. It functions as a transmission from David to Weyland-Yutani, where David explains the experiments that allowed him to create xenomorphs and alien eggs. David says that following his father's vision, he went to the far reaches of space and, with the aid of Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, he found a rotting paradise, obviously referring to the Planet 4. David then says, "I've washed this world clean as a gift to her. We could have built a new, a second Eden, but she refused." Then the camera shifts to Shaw's mutilated body and David comments, "What choice did I have? She was the perfect specimen. Without her cooperation, I had to salvage her parts to begin work on my masterpiece."
I had to salvage her parts to begin work on my masterpiece.
Implying that David used Shaw's organs to create facehuggers and alien eggs, which is beyond horrifying, true body horror. David continues, "I tried so desperately to make her more than human, evolved," suggesting that he may have been experimenting on Shaw while she was still alive, trying to turn her into a hybrid alien queen, a nightmare worse than death that pushes the idea of forced bodily invasion to the extreme. And there are a few shots of David literally cutting Shaw's body, removing her ribcage and various organs. I can't even watch these scenes without my stomach turning, but I'll still include a few shots. This could easily be the most disturbing deleted scene in the entire history of cinema. In the movie, it was only hinted that Shaw was killed by David, and her mutilated cadaver was already beyond grotesque. But this deleted scene makes David even more evil, far beyond redemption, and shows the lengths a rogue AI can go to for its twisted definition of love. David creates the xenomorph. Another huge mystery in Alien Covenant is how exactly David was able to create or recreate the xenomorphs. In the same transmission where he dissects Shaw, David also explained what allowed him to succeed in his xenomorph experiments. David explains that he studied the black goo and discovered its unique properties, saying that it essentially functions like a radical AI, generating unique reactions to every genome it encounters. On top of that, he reveals that he also uncovered forbidden engineer knowledge about bioengineering, and as he says, he took all their secrets for himself. Therefore, by combining the space jockey's bioengineering knowledge with his own discoveries about the black goo, David was able to assemble new life forms. However, there's a major problem. Even though David outlined everything in his transmission, Weyland-Yutani still could not create xenomorphs, and they had to search for them across the cosmos. And that's because they lacked the final component capable to breathe life into an assembly of biological tissues. The golden substance the engineers possess that is essentially the elixir of life itself. Alien Covenant includes another fascinating deleted scene in which David leads Orm down a staircase into a chamber containing alien eggs. In the theatrical cut, the sequence jumps directly from David's laboratory to the catacombs. But in the deleted version, David pauses halfway down the staircase and gives Orm something to inhale, supposedly an ointment to mask a terrible smell. However, the intriguing detail here is that the cup David uses strongly resembles the cup from the deleted opening scene of Prometheus. Although slightly different, it shares the same two-part design, a small cup nested inside a larger bowl. Interestingly, the exact same cup was supposed to be in the temple instead of the green crystal, further implying that the substance in the cup is the blood of the first deacon, the xenomorph deity portrayed on the mural. Therefore, this cup in the deleted scene addresses the biggest mystery and controversy in the movie: how exactly David was able to create the xenomorph. Even though we know that David used the black goo which contained the xenomorph DNA, and that's what allowed him to revive an ancient species that existed long before humans. However, the exact mechanism was never explained, but the appearance of this cup in the deleted scene offers a possible answer. Almost the same cup was used by the engineers to seed life on Earth. This implies that the cup contains a substance capable of initiating life itself. Even in the real world, the moment when random molecules first assemble themselves into a living organism is a mystery beyond our understanding. Therefore, this mysterious jump from 0 to 1 is one of the biggest eternal questions. And the movie offers a possible explanation in this life-giving goldish liquid in the cup. In the film's mythology, this substance may act as the spark of biological creation. So this deleted scene suggests that David may have discovered the same ceremonial cup somewhere in the engineer's city. And if so, that would explain how he managed to revive or recreate the ancient xenomorph lineage, something no human scientist later could replicate. Even though David transmitted his research data to Weyland-Yutani, the company still lacked the cup and therefore could not reproduce his results, which is the reason why they were chasing and trying to find another xenomorph in the cosmos. And like already mentioned, according to the early draft script, this cup contained the blood of the first deacon, an ancient deity, and I explored this part of the lore in other videos. But in general, this single deleted scene may solve one of the largest mysteries in the modern alien lore: how David created xenomorphs. Another deleted scene that some people may not know about is Ripley's daughter. Ellen Ripley actually had a daughter who died while Ripley was floating in space after the incident aboard the Nostromo. After blasting the xenomorph in space, Ripley went into cryosleep for nearly 50 years. Once she was discovered by a salvage crew, she woke up in the hospital. However, her nightmare was just beginning. Carter Burke informed her that her daughter Amanda died just 2 years before they found Ripley, which intensifies Ripley's personal tragedy due to the company's obsession with pursuing the xenomorph. That scene was extremely important, and I'm not sure why it was deleted, since it creates a deeper reason for Ripley to care for Newt. Newt became a replacement for Ripley's daughter, so without that scene, the movie loses some of its depth and emotional gravity. Dog Alien in Alien 3. Lastly, there's a very short but important deleted scene that explains why the xenomorph in Alien 3 is so small. In the earliest cut of the film, the chestburster emerges from a dog, and the production even created a practical infant xenomorph suit for a real dog to portray its early stage. However, later the filmmakers replaced the sequence with the chestburster emerging from an ox, depending on the version you watch. If you saw one of the original 1992 versions, you may have seen the dog version. But in most later cuts, the xenomorph emerges from the bowl instead, which creates a major inconsistency. Xenomorphs typically inherit physical traits from their hosts, so an ox-born alien should have been significantly larger and more massive. However, because the dog version was removed from the final cut, the explanation for the creature's smaller size became a deleted scene rather than the part of the story itself. Thank you guys for watching. What are your thoughts about these scenes, and do you think they should have included them in the movie, and why do you think they were all deleted? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to join the Patreon for extra support. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft, and I'll see you in the next video.